Yeah, I'm Kelvin Alie. I'm a director of the Wildlife Trade Program at the International Fund for Animal Welfare, I4. I'm based in Washington, D.C. My impressions of the workshop so far has been very good. The aim of the workshop is to help the government develop the framework for wildlife trade policy on the island. So it's more like to provide some sort of guidance to the government to develop that policy. Dominica is a very unique place, unique environment. We have a lot of rare, endemic, endangered species of wildlife. Some of our species of wild animals, our Amazon parrots in particular, are highly prized, highly coveted by animal collectors outside. We are seeing a lot of issues over the last couple of years with the introduction of alien invasive species, not necessarily Dominica but other islands. And what we're trying to do is to try to put forward a progressive approach, a progressive plan, a forward-thinking plan that helps safeguard Dominican natural biodiversity from the threats of illegal wildlife trade. The main outcome of this workshop is we are hoping to have some very specific topics addressed, topics that would be important for our wildlife trade policy. For example, the issue of cooperation and coordination among various agencies that have a role to play in regulating wildlife trade. We would like to see some sort of framework and some sort of ideas on how to address that within the context of a policy. Yeah, the issue of animals seized in trade, the issue of when a wild animal is seized coming into the country, then who makes the call, who has the jurisdiction? Is there a need for a policy to address that? I would say yes. There are various departments that deal with regulating wildlife trade: Customs and Excise, Police, Forestry, Wildlife and Parks Division, the Veterinary Department, Fisheries, Plant Quarantine. But all these agencies have their own sort of national sort of policy or legislative framework to function. So what we're trying to do is to try to have a sort of an overarching sort of policy framework that brings in all these relevant elements. In so doing, we have a structure in place to address wildlife trade from a more holistic perspective. I think one of the things that we should do immediately is to establish some sort of interagency task force, interagency cooperation. That is key. I mean, it's Dominica is a small island. Fortunately, everybody know everybody. But one of the things I have seen in the last couple of days, the issue of how we deal with wildlife trade is very subjective. Yes, the Forestry and Wildlife Department has the jurisdiction nationally and domestically for managing and protecting our wildlife, but you have other agencies that have different roles. For example, you have the Environmental Coordinating Unit that deals with the issue of regulation of international trade. They are the government agency with responsibility for implementing the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species, which is an international sort of treaty that Dominica has signed on to. We also see that the Fisheries Department has a sort of a role to play in regulating the trade in marine species. And we see Customs and Excise also have a role. So for me, one of my immediate takeaway, and I think we should try to put into immediate practice when we live here, is rather than the wildlife trade issues being a subjective one, we want to ensure that there is some sort of a structure in place that allows for when there are discussions on the issue of how to address illegal wildlife trade, wildlife smuggling and other issues, that there is a team that is in place that can deal with those issues as and when it arises.